Good morning, and welcome to Lesson 17 in our study of the book of Judges. Today we're going to continue the story of Samson and cover the first 9 verses of chapter 14. Now, if you recall from last week, Samson's birth was somewhat miraculous. His mother had been barren until she was approached by the angel of the Lord, saying that she would conceive a son, and that he would be considered a Nazirite. A Nazirite would be separate to God. Now, normally a Nazirite is somebody who voluntarily agreed to this for a period of time. But this angel told Samson's mother that Samson would be a Nazirite from birth. And it's important to understand what this means. If you go back to Numbers chapter 6, at the first of the chapter, it says this: when either a man or a woman consecrates an offering to take the vow of a Nazirite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine, nor vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine from seed to skin. Now, this is important as we get into this first part of this next chapter, because Samson was supposed to be a Nazirite, and it says at the end of chapter 13 that the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Mahanaim, between Zorah and Eshtaol. So the Spirit of God, or the Holy Spirit, came upon him when he was a youth. However, just because he was endowed with this Spirit does not mean that he was a perfect child. In fact, he seemed to be somewhat of a rebellious teenager, a rebellious youth. For it says now in chapter 14, Samson went down to Timnah. Now, Timnah was a Philistine town on the border of Dan, of the region of Dan of the Israelites and the Philistines. And it was about 3 miles away from Zorah, where Samson was born. Now, Samson had obviously gone down to this town on some previous occasions, because he says he went down and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. He fell in love, or was attracted to, or infatuated with this woman from the Philistines. And he went to his mother and told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. He wasn't really asking, he was sort of making a demand that they get this girl for him as a wife. Now, in those days, marriages were arranged, and it was done by the families arranging the marriage between their daughter and their son. And then the parents of the son would give a dowry to the parents of the girl in order to sort of facilitate and confirm the marriage. And this is what he means by go get for me this girl as a wife. Now, the parents did not appreciate this. They did not accept this, because they said, his mother and father said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren, or among all my people, that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? In other words, from the un-Jewish nation. Now, this was an important aspect, and still to some degree is in today's society. But in those days, God had forbidden the Israelites to take wives from foreign people. And it says back in Deuteronomy, chapter 6, it tells about what the Israelites should do to the conquered people. And then it says, you shall fear the Lord your God, and serve him, and shall take oaths in his name. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are all around you. Okay? So this really means that you should not intermingle and intermarry with other peoples. And it says in chapter 7, you shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them. Verse 3, nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods, so the anger of the Lord will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. So God was saying you should not told the Israelites they should not take daughters of other nations to be wives for their sons, or vice versa. And this is exactly what Samson was asking his parents to do, to take for him a wife from the Philistines. Now, in all fairness, the nations that God listed as not to have intermarriage with did not include the Philistines. But still, the general principle was there: do not intermarry with people of other nations, of foreign gods, because they will turn you away from me. But Samson was insistent. He said, I want this girl for my wife. You must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines for me. This is what he's saying. He told his parents. They protested. He said, you must go and get her. Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she pleases me well. Now, the parents were against this, but apparently this was sort of something which God had already agreed with himself, because it says he did not know that this was of the Lord, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So the Philistines controlled Israel. But there was still a lot of intermingling between the groups, because Samson went from his own town of Zorah down to this town of Timnah, where he met this girl. And he fell in love with her. And he requested his parents to get her for him to be his wife, even though they protested. And they protested because of what I just read in Deuteronomy, that it was commanded by God not to intermingle with foreign races. Now this is something which still sort of applies even in more modern times. If you go to 2 Corinthians, it says there in chapter 6, verse 14, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what has cord was Christ with Belial? So what part is a believer with a non-believer? What he's really saying is people of the faith should mingle and marry with people of a similar faith and not be intermingled. For a Christian to marry a non-believer often causes troubles. It's not really a commandment, as more as it is a suggestion or a recommendation now. But in the old days it was a commandment that the peoples of Israel should not intermarry with women of foreign nations. But his father and mother did not know that God had actually wanted this to happen, because it was his way of getting against the Philistines eventually, because he had given Samson the idea or the problem of beginning the freedom from the Philistines, rescuing the Israelites from the Philistines. This would be the start. Okay, he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines, chapter 13, verse 5. So, this was part of God's plan for this to take place, even though it was contrary to what he already had commanded. This was very similar to what had happened to Joseph back in the book of Genesis, when he was sold by his brothers into the hands of the Egyptians. This was not really what God had planned, or on the surface what God had planned, but God had used it for good. As it says in Genesis 50, verse 20, "But as for you, you meant evil against me." This is Joseph speaking. "But God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." So what it seems to be evil, God was actually going to bring about for good. And this is what he's saying. At that time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel, and it was God's plan to use this as seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now you notice, if you're a Nazarite, it was not supposed to have anything to do with grape juice, with wine, with vineyards, but they went through the vineyards of Timnah, right where God said he would not want them to go. And this is where we get into the story where a young lion came out and surprised them and came against Samson, who, using extraordinary strength, defeated and killed and tore the lion apart. So he was apparently by himself at this time. Perhaps his parents had gone on ahead, or perhaps they had not gone through the vineyard, they had gone around it. We don't really know. But anyway, he was by himself, and he did not tell his parents what he had done, because he had suddenly received almost superhuman strength. Was this just the Holy Spirit acting in him? Or was it just the fact fear and adrenaline sometimes causes people to do things which are extraordinary? We've heard people of people lifting cars off their children when the car ran over them, or doing extraordinary strength when they suddenly had to and were given that ability to perform. So this is what happened. Samson suddenly had this extraordinary strength, perhaps because of the Spirit upon him. He tore the lion apart, but he did not tell his parents about it. This lion came out of nowhere. And this is very similar to what we were told about the lion in Genesis 4:7, where God spoke to the children of Adam, and he said, "If you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desires for you." So the lion is symbolic of sin. The lion came at Samson, just as the lion did in Genesis. And in 1 Peter it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." This is sort of what happens. This is like the symbol of sin, because of Samson being in a vineyard where he was not supposed to be. The lion came at him. But Samson at that time defeated the lion. He didn't tell his parents about it. So he went down and conversed with this woman, and then they left. And sometime later, when he came back again, he went by the same area where he defeated the lion, which was now simply probably a skeleton or a carcass, and found bees had made their nest in the bones. And he scooped up and took honey with him and gave it to his father to eat, along with eating some himself. He didn't tell them where he'd come from, because, again, a Nazarite was not supposed to come with any association with anything dead. And Samson not only disobeyed the Nazarite vow in going through a vineyard, now he disobeyed the Nazarite vow by going near a carcass. So what these 9 verses show us is Samson's rebellion against his parents and against his standing as a Nazarite in the eyes of God. People often do this today. They make vows, they do things which are not supposed to be done, and they continue to do them in a rebellious type of way. But what this is doing is showing us that even in people who disobey what God had told them, or disavow their own vow to God, God can still use them in his own way, and still does use them. Because here we have Samson, who is supposed to be the one who begins to show Israel away from the hands of the Philistines, who has been miraculously conceived because of the visit of the angel of the Lord, who now has been rebellious against his parents. He has done what his parents did not want him to do. He has taken for his wife a foreign girl. He has walked through vineyards where he's not supposed to be, and he's gone to a carcass which he's not supposed to be at. So all these things show how he has repeatedly defied what God has apparently promised him and his parents. And in spite of this, God is still using him. So this pretty well sums up what's in the first 9 verses of this chapter. And we're going on to the next part of the chapter in the next lesson, because it shows Samuel's continued disobedience and defiance, and in spite of what he does, how God uses him in the end. So this is all for today. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week. Bye for now.